Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Now let's take a look at today's top stories. The 43-day US government shutdown is now over after President Trump approves a congressional bill to reopen the government. Thousands of files from convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have been released, raising fresh questions about his ties to Donald Trump. And Ukraine's justice and energy ministers have resigned amid a major embezzlement scandal. US President Donald Trump has signed a bill to end the longest ever government shutdown last night. It came shortly after the House, the lower chamber of US Congress, passed the bill in a 222 to 209 vote, with 6 Democrats joining the Republicans to vote yes. It's been 43 days since the shutdown began, and thousands of federal employees have been working without pay, furloughed or made redundant.
And it's an honor now to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you.
A deal to end the longest government shutdown in US history, 43 days, has been signed by President Donald Trump, roughly 2 hours after the House of Representatives voted to restart disrupted food assistance, pay hundreds of thousands of federal workers, and revive a hobbled air traffic control system.
The gentleman is recognized.
It's after weeks of partisan standoff in Washington over a funding bill. It means the federal government will open and the funding will go through to the end of January. The House of Representatives passed the package by 222 to 209 votes, with 6 Democrats who voted yes. The main stumbling block over the funding bill was the Affordable Care Act.
We will continue to fight to lower the high cost of living. House Democrats will continue to fight to address the health care crisis that Republicans have created. And House Democrats will continue to fight to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for tens of millions of Americans. This fight is not over. We're just getting started.
US House Speaker Mike Johnson accusing Democrats of using Americans as leverage in a failed political tactic.
No, I'm pleased that tonight on the CR we had 3 appropriations bills that we'll send over to the president's desk in just a short amount of time tonight to get signed into law. That's an innovation too. As you all know, it's been years since Congress actually did separate appropriations bills. I'm proud of that achievement, but I'm really sad that it took us so long to get here. It was so much pain that had to be endured to get to this point.
The White House blamed the Democrats with the shutdown, which has left thousands of federal workers unpaid.
The Democrats' weakness and their unwillingness to buck the fringe members of their party dragged this harmful shutdown on for 7 weeks and inflicted massive pain onto the American public. But let's be clear. The clean CR being voted on today in the House of Representatives that will lead to the reopening of the federal government is what President Trump and Republicans have supported from day one.
The package extends government funding through to the end of January, adding roughly $1.8 trillion a year to the nation's $38 trillion debt.
Now, US lawmakers have released damning new emails that suggest President Donald Trump knew about the conduct of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. It's a move that puts pressure on the White House to publish in full the so-called Epstein files.
In her first day in office, Democratic Representative Adelita Grijalva signed a petition to release unclassified US files on convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
We need to stand up for...
Her signature gives Democrats the final number needed to force a congressional vote, adding pressure on President Donald Trump's administration.
Speaker Johnson purposefully obstructed my swearing in by canceling vote after vote. And the Epstein files discharge petition sat 1 signature short. With my signing, we move 1 step closer to the truth that they will try to deny, but that survivors deserve their day of justice, and the American people demand it.
The push came as House Democrats released emails between Jeffrey Epstein, author Michael Wolff, and Ghislaine Maxwell, They say the messages raise new questions about what President Trump may have known about Epstein's abuse of underage girls. Among the correspondence, Epstein reportedly told author Michael Wolff in 2019 that Trump knew about the girls, while another email to Ghislaine Maxwell described Trump as that dog that hasn't barked. Maxwell is now serving a 20-year prison sentence for helping Epstein traffic minors. The White House dismissed the claims as politically driven.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
The renewed dispute comes as survivors, and rights advocates continue to call for transparency. Whether the records will be made public now depends on whether Congress agrees to move forward with a vote.
Over to Ukraine now, where two senior Ukrainian ministers have resigned over a $100 million corruption scandal in the energy sector. Across Ukraine, citizens are speaking out over the alleged allegations, insisting on fairness and transparency.
Ukrainians have voiced their frustration over the alleged corruption scandal rocking their country this week. It's after top ministers resigned on Wednesday following an investigation uncovering a $100 million fraud scheme in the energy sector. Anti-corruption authorities say they've detained 5 people and identified 2 others still at large. They're suspected of being involved in the alleged case to control procurement at nuclear agency Energoatom and other state enterprises. It comes at a time where people are facing daily blackouts from Russian strikes on infrastructure.
I was actually very angry after the shelling of the energy infrastructure because it turns out that our energy facilities are not protected for what year of the war. And I would like the country's authorities to deal with this issue more. And, in fact, here is the evidence why this happened.
I do not want to support anyone. I want us to have a rule of law. Did they prove it, the wrongdoing? Let them go to prison. If not, a person is free.
Some suffer and others line their pockets. This is corruption. It must be eradicated.
Justice Minister Herman Galushchenko, who previously served as Energy Minister, and Energy Minister Svetlana Hrinchuk both quit their positions. Hrinchuk denied any wrongdoing but said she wanted to ensure a fair investigation. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the resignations were necessary, stressing there is no room for corruption as Ukraine battles Russian attacks and power shortages. Western allies, including the European Union and G7, have urged Kyiv to handle the probe swiftly and transparently to maintain trust in its reform efforts.
French lawmakers have voted to pause President Emmanuel Macron's plan to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. The suspension, approved by 255 votes to 146, is part of a political deal to secure support from key parties, including the Socialists, for next year's budget. The move does not affect people already receiving pensions. It simply delays the reform. The full Social Security bill still needs final approval before the suspension officially takes effect. The vote comes as Macron's government faces a hung parliament and France's largest Eurozone budget deficit. Today marks 10 years since the 13th November attack in Paris, which killed at least 130 people. Commemorations are taking place across the city to honour those who were killed and highlight stories of survival and resilience.
France is marking 10 years since the 13th of November 2015 attacks in Paris that killed at least 130 people and injured hundreds more. The string of coordinated attacks struck multiple locations across Paris, including the Bataclan Theater, several cafes and restaurants, and the Stade de France Stadium. Leaving the city in shock, Islamic State claimed responsibility for the assaults, stating that they were a response to France's military actions against the group in Iraq and Syria. Emergency services worked through the night, rescuing survivors, treating the wounded, and recovering victims. At the scenes, Salah Abdeslam, the only surviving member of the main attack cell, was convicted of terrorism and murder in 2022 and sentenced to life in prison, while 19 others were found guilty of helping organize the attacks. Over the past decade, France has strengthened counterterrorism measures and established permanent memorials at the sites of the attacks.
My brother died at the Bataclan, so I came here today to pay my respects at the Bataclan, and I'll be back tomorrow. It was important for me to come to Place de la République, which is also emblematic of France when it comes to freedom, so that we don't forget him.
After the attacks on November 13th, it's true that there was a lot of fear among the population. To be perfectly honest with you, everyone was suspicious of each other, but it's true that in recent years, things have calmed down a bit. So we're really trying to ensure that we can connect with the population and really make sure that we're all sharing this together.
The Eiffel Tower was illuminated in the colors of the French flag, reflecting both the city's resilience and the enduring personal impact on families and survivors.
Now to the Middle East, where life in Gaza remains difficult even after the ceasefire. Israeli restrictions and war damage have left many families without electricity, relying on flashlights and candles at night.
Daily life in Gaza comes to a halt when the sun sets. Families here are still living without electricity, more than 2 years after the war began. For Hanan Al-Juju, feeding her 3 children has become a nightly challenge.
We stay in the darkness. Once the sun sets and the Maghrib prayer is called, if the light of the flashlight is available, we light it. If not, we go to sleep without dinner or light.
Her family has relied on candles, then flashlights. But the constant cost of batteries and the danger of fire in their displacement tent has made even that difficult. Before the war, Gaza received electricity from Israel and its lone power plant. But after the conflict erupted in October 2023, Israel imposed a total siege, and the Strip's power station quickly ran out of fuel. Some residents have improvised, setting up solar-powered or generator charging points. Mohammed Al-Hor runs one from his bombed home, which was hit in the war.
Of course, in the early days of the war, large parts of the electrical grid and cables of the electricity company were damaged, leading to power outage around the 7th day of war. From the beginning, we used to charge in the houses. After that, we set up a charging point inside the house. The charging point was also bombed, and my brother was martyred inside this place.
The damage to Gaza's electricity system is severe. More than 80% of the distribution networks have been destroyed, along with warehouses, machinery, and vehicles. Losses that experts estimate at $728 million.
This sector is considered an essential crane, which all essential sectors in Gaza depend on. The amount of electricity the Gaza Strip needed before the aggression was approximately 600 megawatts today. For the past 2 years, no electricity has reached the Gaza Strip. The amount of electricity reaching Gaza is 0.
Officials at Israel's Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories says it is facilitating humanitarian aid, including fuel for electricity, and has connected power lines to desalination plants to support drinking water. But restoring full electricity will require a massive rebuild of Gaza's damaged network.
As COP30 enters a critical phase in Belém, global attention is focused on how commitments made here will shape the planet's climate future. Leading these negotiations is André Arana Correa do Lago, Brazil's Secretary for Climate, Energy and Environment and the President of COP30. In an exclusive conversation, A News TV's Orkan Amashov spoke to Mr. do Lago, who discussed the summit's priorities, Brazil's vision for climate diplomacy, and what meaningful progress could look like in the days ahead.
I think that people are reading the report. Nobody has told us that we didn't do a good job, so I'm very happy that Minister Babayev and myself are being recognized as a big effort. And on Saturday, we're going to have a presentation about it. And I think it's going to be the occasion in which countries maybe are going to ask us some tough questions. There is a positive mood. I think that most of the delegates understand that we need to send the world a positive message about multilateralism, and this is the moment.
Also present at COP30 is Azerbaijan's ambassador at large, Elshad Iskandarov, who spoke about the Baku Hub for Climate and Peace Action, an initiative designed to help countries facing both environmental crises and instability by connecting international funds, expertise and partnerships.
Well, in the nutshell, among the climate vulnerable countries, there is a special group, around 20 to 24 parties, which along with being climate vulnerable, they also experience either conflicts and hardships of post-conflict situations, or they have internal fragility, or in the high needs of humanitarian needs. So one expects that those countries would receive more attention, more funding, more international cooperation. They in fact receive 10 times less than other LDC countries, which in their own turn receive just 10% of their needs. So 100 times less than needed for effective climate action.
The Gambia is grateful to His Excellency Ambassador El Ashad for the support and the proactive engagement with the Gambia. We met in the UNGA, and there we attended their Baku Hub engagement, and we expressed our concerns in terms of our vulnerability with respect to this topic. And he was definitely proactive and then engaged with us, and it was very quick. We thank the entire Baku presidency for supporting the less privileged, those that are the less developed countries who are in the forefront of the climate crisis. And I think this is what we need. This is assurance. This is also what we need to boost our ambitious level in terms of climate actions.
Now we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll talk to our guest about a $100 million corruption scandal in Ukraine's energy sector. Stay tuned.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. Ukraine's government is facing a major crisis as the energy and justice ministers have resigned. The move follows a corruption investigation into the state nuclear firm Energoatom and other state enterprises, which allegedly involved kickbacks worth around $100 million. Zelensky described the scheme as absolutely unacceptable, while Ukraine faces ongoing war, infrastructural threats, and a critical need for reform to maintain Western support. Joining me now to discuss what this means for Ukraine's reform agenda, its wartime resilience, and the country's international credibility is Gregory Matthew, political analyst from Brussels, Belgium. Gregory, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Delikia.
Now, to begin with, how significant is the scale of this scandal and the involvement of key ministers, especially amid war conditions? I mean, Ukraine's got enough on its plate as it is.
Indeed, and it's not a small amount we are talking about. It's allegedly hundreds of millions that have disappeared in the pockets of who knows who. Indeed, two ministers resigned. Well, it's not clear if they resigned or if they were dismissed. First comment. Minister Galushenko decided to resign, and both are in their capacity of acting energy minister and former energy minister in a scandal that is involving the major supplier of electricity in Ukraine, Energoatom. We all know about the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is under the control of Energoatom. And my first thought today are for the Ukrainians that are indeed suffering electricity cut, because, as you know, there are a sustained campaign on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine from Russia. There are bombs every day on this infrastructure. And at the eve of a winter, it's always concerning for the people in Ukraine to be able to get a warmer room.
Okay, now President Zelensky has framed this as a matter of trust. How important is that element when it comes to governance in wartime Ukraine?
Well, the problem here is that the people allegedly involved are close to Zelensky. I would like to mention one person, Mr. Mindich, who is allegedly the brain of the corruption system. And this only adds grist to the mill of those who are indeed categorizing Ukraine as a corrupt country. By the way, there is an international ranking, CPI, Corruption Perception Index, and Ukraine is number 105 on the list of 180 countries. The first in the ranking is Denmark, followed by Finland, and Ukraine is very poorly ranked for years. It's not the news, I'm sorry to say, that there is corruption in Ukraine. It was the case during Yanukovych time, and this is one of the root of the Orange Revolution. And Ukraine today is very poorly ranked. By the way, Russia is ranked 154 in this international ranking, so much behind Ukraine. But for President Zelensky, now it's to convince the international partners, notably European Union and the USA, that the money that he is requesting, let's say on a daily basis, is not going to fall in some dodgy pockets.
Okay, now with top cabinet ministers implicated, Gregory, how might this affect the broader reform agenda, including anti-corruption and EU integration efforts?
Well, I think that the work of the NABU and the SAP, so the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor, should be praised here, because those are operating in a very hostile environment at a time of war, and also they don't have only friends within Ukraine. You remember that in July, they were under the grill and they were protesting the streets in Kiev because the administration wanted to, let's say, cut the power of these two institutions. In every democracy, it's very needed to have independent institutions that are monitoring the spending of public money. And those two are doing their job. And it's a good sign that they don't stop to target the elite of the country, but corruption is something that is happening at every level of the society. You also may remember in the past months that there were military high-ranking officers that were fired because they were in fact selling the fact for people not to go to the war, not to be invited for training, etc. And it was also millions that we spoke about at the time. So when there is interaction between politics and money, it's always a fertile ground for people with poor values to arrange some side deals. And it happened in Ukraine, it happened in the energy sector this time, it happened in the military sector, and unfortunately, I would say every Ukrainian may face such corruption temptation at every moment.
And Gregory, how might Western donors and institutions respond? Could this jeopardize aid and investment just when Ukraine needs it most?
Well, as I said, this recent event adds grist to the mill of those in Brussels and mostly the Kremlin allies that will find arguments now to say, okay, why should we continue to waste European taxpayer money, which ultimately will fall in the pockets of corrupt Ukrainians? This maybe will be heard soon in the mouth of some Hungarian MEPs or some Slovak MEPs, Ukraine is giving them an argument in this field. But at the same time, I would like to say something. When European Union, for example, is asking for reform, for more action against corruption, etc., when you are willing to be a professor of democracy and of transparency, you should clean your own path. I would only remember that Madame von der Leyen never revealed the conversation she had with the president of Pfizer. And I would ultimately mention that the former Commissioner of Justice of the European Union, Mr. Didier Reynders, the Belgian commissioner, is now under investigation in Belgium for money laundering, for allegedly €1 million that was on his account, and he cannot explain how. So when you want to ask Ukrainians, and legitimately ask Ukrainians, to do efforts, you should at the same time make sure that you come with clean hands.
Okay, and from a domestic political viewpoint, what are the implications for the government and public confidence in the government?
Well, it certainly fragilized the Prime Minister, but I think she took the right decision. The trust of the Ukrainian people in the government and is not very high, and the popularity of Mr. Zelensky is not very high. Maybe only Mr. Macron is less popular in his own country.
Greg, can I just interrupt here? Would this mean that Zelensky would need to go?
Well, the investigation will reveal at which level he could be personally involved. But we are speaking about people who knows that. And at the moment, we must let the NABU and the SRP continue the investigation and prosecute the people. That when you prosecute someone, you need evidence. And the most difficult part is always to gather evidences. But politically, Zelensky yesterday instructed the Prime Minister to fire those two ministers, which is somehow a recognition of his own responsibility in this matter.
Okay, and finally, Gregory, what will you be watching closely in the coming weeks that will tell us that this crisis has been managed responsibly or that it's still brewing?
Well, first, as I said, the prosecution office should continue its work. I understand that some of the people flew away from Ukraine. And this is also a question. How is it possible that a man under 60 years old, normally they cannot leave Ukraine. They are supposed to stay in the country. So how this gentleman was able to fly away is a question. Was he helped? Is he a privileged person? And then the people responsible at all levels in the administration, but also in the business side. Let me explain how it works. The subcontractor, here we are speaking about 100 million that were embezzled, okay? So the subcontractor is saying, for my service, it costs $10. And the minister or the ministry would say, I will pay you $12 and you return me $2. This is how it works. This is where money is appearing. And they are responsible to have a corruption act. You need a corrupted person and a corrupter. So all of them should be brought to justice, and I trust the rule of law and the justice of Ukraine will give them penalty if they deserve it.
Okay. Gregory, thank you so much for joining us today. It was most insightful.
You're very welcome. Thanks a lot.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll take a look at key stories shaping the region. Stay tuned.
World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
What is power? Has leadership truly evolved, or are the old rules of geopolitics still pulling the strings behind the scenes? Who is really powerful? And what makes people feel powerless? Our new series explores the secrets, strategies, and consequences of power.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a look at key stories shaping the region. Fragments of a Turkish Air Force C-130 Hercules that crashed in Georgia on Tuesday will be transported to an airbase in Kayseri province in Turkey for further examination. Investigators at the crash site are conducting a comprehensive probe into the incident before the wreckage is moved. The Turkish Ministry of National Defence confirmed all 20 service members on board died. The aircraft's black box was delivered to Turkey overnight. Authorities say the investigation at the Kayseri base will help determine the cause of the crash. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev has hosted a delegation from the U.S. Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in Baku. The sides discussed the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia and the growing partnership with the United States. Delegates thanked the president for officially registering the church in Azerbaijan and said they would attend the opening of its Baku office. Two separate and deadly explosions hit Delhi and Islamabad within a day of each other, killing more than 20 people. Pakistan's Prime Minister blames Indian-backed elements, while India rejected the claims, although it's reported that there's no evidence the two blasts are linked.
Two deadly blasts struck the capitals of India and Pakistan within a day of each other this week, reigniting political finger-pointing and security fears between both countries. On Tuesday, a suicide bomber detonated explosives outside Islamabad's judicial complex, killing at least 12 and injuring more than 24. Officials said the attacker failed to breach the court's security and struck near a police vehicle instead. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has accused what he says are Indian-backed elements of orchestrating a deadly suicide attack in Islamabad, claims that India has dismissed as baseless and politically motivated. And just a day before the Islamabad suicide blast, a car explosion near Delhi's historic Red Fort killed at least 8 people and wounded more than 20 others. Indian authorities have called it a terror incident and are probing possible links to recent arrests. The government says it's treating the investigation as a top priority. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says those responsible won't be spared.
I was in touch with all the agencies investigating this incident throughout last night. Discussions were underway and threads of information were being linked. Our agencies will get to the bottom of this conspiracy. The conspirators behind this will not be spared.
While investigators in both countries say there is no evidence linking the two incidents, the near-simultaneous blasts have deepened mistrust between the neighbours and highlighted ongoing security challenges in the region.
The business community in Afghanistan has been given 3 months to find alternative trade routes to reduce reliance with Pakistan. Islamabad says this decision will stop militant activity carried out by armed groups in Afghanistan. The move follows an ongoing breakdown in trust between the two countries. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
In Kabul, the Deputy Prime Minister Abdul Ghani Brother delivered a blunt message to Afghan industrialists and traders. Speaking at a high-level meeting, he said the time has come for Afghanistan to shift course. Brother accused Pakistan of repeatedly blocking key trade routes and using commercial and humanitarian channels as political leverage. Action, he says, have damaged traders on both sides of the border. He stressed that Afghanistan can no longer afford this vulnerability, especially as cross-border tensions continue to rise. The Deputy Prime Minister also took aim at what he called the influx of low-quality medicines imported from Pakistan, claiming it is costing Afghanistan hundreds of millions of dollars each year. He urged pharmaceutical importers to immediately begin sourcing products from alternative markets. In a rare and firm declaration, Brother said Afghanistan will no longer intervene on behalf of traders who choose to continue importing or exporting goods through Pakistan. Traders with existing contracts in Pakistan have been granted a 3-month window to wrap up their dealings there. This shift marks a major moment in Afghan-Pakistan relations. Afghanistan has long relied heavily on Pakistan for access to ports and markets. But with diplomatic strains intensifying, Kabul is signalling a decisive turn toward new trade corridors. Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
The United States has extended its suspension of tough sanctions on Syria, offering a glimpse of relief for businesses and civilians. But many on the ground say real change will take time before the country can rebuild.
In Damascus, Syrian businessmen are watching closely as US sanctions against the country are partially eased. The Treasury Department recently extended the suspension of the Caesar Act, a policy that has long restricted trade and financial transactions. Bashar Azar, who runs an import and export company, says some activity at the ports is visible, but normal business operations remain difficult.
We are still operating in the same way, in the sense of how you manage your affairs through banks, currency exchange shops and transferring funds, and changing the transfer lines or banks. Until now, Syrian banks cannot provide direct SWIFT transfers from your accounts and transfer. We are still using banks outside Syria, such as those in Dubai and Lebanon, Iraq, Turkey.
Azar says that while shipments of iron, cement and other building materials are arriving in Syria, real reconstruction of the country has yet to begin. The suspension follows talks in Washington between US President Donald Trump and Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, who seeks full removal of sanctions. Trump promised support for Syria's recovery, but full repeal requires approval from the US Congress.
First of all, the suspension comes as a continuation of the previous suspension. I think it was 6 months ago, and now it's the second suspension. Of course, it's a lot better than not having that decision, but again, it is not a repeal of the sanctions. So the law is still in place. The law cannot be repealed unless Congress votes and unless it goes through the congressional process, which is going to take some time.
For Syrians like Azar, the partial relief offers cautious optimism, but practical changes, access to banking, investment and reconstruction are still limited.
Iraqi's Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani's coalition has come first in the country's parliamentary elections. That's according to early results. The Electoral Commission said voter turnout reached just over 56%. With no single party holding a majority in Iraq's 329-seat parliament, coalition talks are expected to be lengthy and complex. Aiming for a second term, Sudani positioned himself as a reformer, focused on stability and progress. Still, many young Iraqis dismissed the vote as a way for old political forces to once again divide the nation's oil riches. Turkey is emerging as a key venue for Ukraine-Russia dialogue. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with Rustem Umerov, head of Ukraine's delegation in Ankara, for talks with Russia on Wednesday. Umerov said he was working to unblock the process of prisoner exchanges with Moscow and would hold further meetings in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Russia's state news agency TASS quoted a foreign ministry official as saying Moscow is ready to resume peace negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev signed a declaration on comprehensive strategic partnership in Moscow on Wednesday. The document aims to strengthen regional cooperation and improve coordination along the two countries' shared border. Putin said the declaration includes measures to deepen ties in key sectors. He noted that Russia may increase gas supplies to Kazakhstan, particularly to the northern and eastern regions where major industries are located. Tokayev described Russia as Kazakhstan's main partner and said cooperation continues despite global challenges. Iran is facing its worst water crisis in decades, with reservoirs drying up and officials warning that parts of the capital could soon become unlivable. The shortages stem from years of drought, poor management and rising temperatures. Let's take a look at that story.
Iran is grappling with one of its most severe water shortages in recent history. Officials warn that if rains do not come soon, Tehran, home to over 10 million people, could face water rationing or even evacuation. The capital relies on 5 main dams, but inflows from nearby rivers have dropped sharply. Tehran's regional water company says water levels are down more than 40% from last year, leaving the Amir Kabir Dam at just 8% of capacity. Across the country, nearly 1 in 10 major dams has effectively run dry, as a scorching summer, poor rainfall and record heat waves have pushed supplies to the brink.
We had neither rain nor enough water, and now finally we can see that the dams are running out of water. They are so empty that you can see the bottom of the dams. It's clear that the dams are no longer sufficient at all.
Experts say the shortages stem from a mix of factors: years of below-average rainfall, overuse and inefficient irrigation practices. Climate change has worsened the strain, with rising temperatures accelerating evaporation and groundwater loss.
We must move the cities to the seaside so we can draw water from the sea, and the population should also be moved there, so that water can be taken from near the center of the city.
Well, I don't know whether it's scientifically possible or not, but in my opinion, cloud seeding is one of the solutions that should be pursued. Just as many other countries are doing it, I would like for it to be done in our country as well.
Authorities are now focusing on short-term solutions to preserve what remains, urging households to reduce consumption and install storage tanks and pumps to prevent severe disruptions. Longer-term plans include improving water efficiency and exploring desalination projects.
Now we'll take a short break. When we return, we will discuss the escalating tensions between Pakistan and India as both countries launch probes after blasts in New Delhi and Islamabad. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Pakistan and India are facing rising tensions after explosions in both New Delhi and Islamabad triggered parallel investigations on each side of the border. Now, the two countries have condemned the blasts and ordered immediate probes, but the incidents come at a time when relations are already strained, raising concerns over miscalculation, political rhetoric and regional stability. For now, officials in both capitals are urging caution as investigators work to determine who is behind the attacks. Joining me now to unpack is Osama Rizvi, founder of Rizvi Insights from Lahore, Pakistan. Osama, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, firstly, what do we know about the blasts in New Delhi and Islamabad, and how are the two investigations progressing so far?
Well, as we all know, there were two blasts by the difference of, I think, 1 day or something. First in Delhi and then Islamabad. In Delhi, it happened near the metro area, Red Fort area in Pakistan. Islamabad happened in the judicial complex, both killing around 13 to 15 people and injuring dozens more. What is different right now is the fact that both sides have seem to show some sort of restraint, at least in the shorter run. And that makes sense given the recent skirmish between both the countries, that resulted in a truce back in May 10th. But I think it's too early to be really positive or happy about it as well, because we don't know what will follow after this. So I think it's a developing story and it should be treated like one.
Okay, and do either of the attacks show any early signs of coordination, or are they being treated as separate incidents at this stage?
I think at this moment it's too hard to say, too early to say anything about it being a coordinated attack. In the case of Pakistan, a faction, a splinter of TTP has has taken the responsibility. We need to also remind ourselves that there have been some growing tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan recently, and that has also resulted in border skirmishes over the course of previous few months. That is one factor. On the other hand, in India, the probe is ongoing, but the post-war doctrine where it was said that every attack would be treated as an act of war, that has really constrained the Indian hand as well, because if they accept this as a terrorist attack or something like that, public and policymakers would accept a really strong response. And maybe at this point, they cannot do that. So each side has their own reason to show restraint at the moment.
Okay. Now, you did say earlier that both governments were showing restraint, but how might these blasts influence the already fragile diplomatic atmosphere between India and Pakistan?
Well, the relationship has been already quite brittle, if you may, and Pakistan has accused India or Indian proxies specifically for carrying out the attack. I once again believe there are other ways, like establishment of a DGMO helpline, backdoor diplomacy assisted by the third parties, legal framework. But I'm not in a position to say how or when, or even if the conditions or the circumstances between both of the countries would worsen or lead to something else. For now, as I said, I think Pakistan, for instance, I can talk about that. It has been one of the most it has suffered from one of the most severe bouts of terrorism. And we have also been one of the countries that have done the most for it, I think, in the whole world. So Pakistan would have a very strong response and stance not to get all of this terrorism thing restarted here. So that certainly is our policy at the moment.
Okay, you also mentioned Afghanistan earlier. How might Afghanistan's internal security situation factor into the wider regional context as both probes unfold?
Well, Afghanistan is a very interesting country at the moment. As I told you, with Pakistan, the relationship is a little bit fraught, but the same country has now been sort of seeing a thaw in its relationship with India. But until unless it is proven if there were any TTP factions or splinter groups also involved in the Indian attack, India would find itself in a very awkward position. But Pakistan still has its stance against terrorism and against not accepting the presence of a third hand in Afghanistan or in any other country. So Afghanistan tends to play a very important role, should be watched very carefully. And for now, Afghanistan's official government has condemned the attack, but let's see what happens next.
Okay, and Osama, how will the international community likely respond if tensions continue to rise?
The recent events have clearly shown that this region is very fickle and very prone to escalation. And we have evidence of that, recent evidence. So and once again, the importance of this region, given the rekindled relationship between US and China, the interest of the US in the rare earths in Balochistan in Pakistan, and it's important, and it already enjoys a really good relation with India. And the whole macroeconomic situation at the moment is as such that no one wants any further geopolitical escalation in any open front at the moment. So I believe that Turkey, US, and other countries, Middle East even, they would step in if things get out of hand and sort of try to ameliorate the matters and lead it towards some sort of dialogue or discourse.
Okay, and Osama, my last question to you. What indicators should we watch in the coming days that will tell us whether this situation is stabilizing or sliding into deeper crisis?
Well, the first and foremost, and I think the only most important one would be how would each of the countries respond. That's what I'm watching. We will get some inkling or insinuation of that as the probes or investigations carry on. But for now, I think that is the most important thing that needs to be watched.
Okay, Osama, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your insight and time.
Thank you so much.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.